Good morning. It's Lauren Lockman coming to you from the Tanglewood Wellness Center. And we've been here now for coming up on a month, 4 weeks, with most of the you that are here with me now. And we've talked a little bit about the Four Agreements. It's come up in conversation. I mentioned to you guys that it was one of the books I used to teach during our internship. And there's some very powerful stuff there. And so the guest here had asked me if I would talk about that, and that's what we're going to do today. So let me start by telling you a little bit of background about the Four Agreements. The book itself was written by Don Miguel Ruiz. Are we recording?
Oh yeah, I was just going to zoom in on the book.
The book was written by Don Miguel Ruiz, and what it does is it distills down ancient Toltec wisdom. Now, the Toltec were a tribe in southern Mexico that were known as very wise people. And so, although Don Miguel Ruiz wrote the book, it's really his explanation of this ancient wisdom that he's actually part of that Toltec lineage. So that's where it's coming from. And the basic idea is that living in society, we wind up making agreements with other people, with our family, with our children, with people around us, but most importantly with ourselves. And those agreements that we make tend to reflect the fears that control most of us, most of the time. The Toltec talk about, or Ruiz in the book talks about, the idea of the smoky mirror, that each person is a mirror that allows us to see ourselves reflected in them. So what we see about other people is really about us. But he said that because of the dream that we live in, it's like there's a layer of smoke between us and the mirror so that we're not able to actually see ourselves clearly. And so this idea of the smoky mirror is that what we're seeing isn't really a true look at who we are. And who we are, according to the Toltec, is part of that divine energy of God, that divine creative energy of the universe that is God. So the Toltec would say that we are God. Each of us is God. Everyone is part of God. In fact, everything is part of God. But that we lose touch with that. We've lost our connection to that truth, and that instead we tend to live, as I said a moment ago, controlled by fear. Most of the time, people are concerned about what other people are going to think of them, how they look. Is this okay? Am I going to look okay if I do this or say that? And so they're constantly editing themselves and not really living an authentic life, not being willing to be completely who they are. And this, by the way, if people wonder, this is an internship about taking health to the highest level possible. Why would we be focused on the Four Agreements? Well, it's the same reason we focused on nonviolent communication and on radical honesty. Because learning to create the highest level of emotional poise, including how we express ourselves and who we're actually being in each moment, is a critical piece of creating the highest level of health possible. If we're living our lives constantly wearing masks and costumes, trying to pretend to be something that we're not, then we're never going to be able to express what we really are. And we are always going to be negatively impacting our level of health and vitality in the process. So there's a little bit of background. And what I'll do now is I'll actually read Ruiz's own brief description of each of the Four Agreements, and then we'll talk about each of them briefly. Okay, I'll expand on that a little bit. So the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. And what he says here is speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. The second one, don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When you're immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. The third one, don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. And the fourth one, always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be it will be different when you're healthy as opposed to sick. Under any circumstance, simply do your best, and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. So those are the 4 agreements. Let me go back now and talk a little bit more about each of these. Be impeccable with your word. So again, he starts out by talking about speaking with integrity, using the word only in the direction of truth and love. Be impeccable with your word is, at first glance, about being honest all the time. But it's more than just that. That's part of it. He is saying, be completely honest. Never be dishonest under any circumstances. Okay? Never under any circumstances. I stress this because people tell me, having taught radical honesty for 12 or 13 years, people frequently said, there are times you have to be dishonest. And Brad Blanton, the author of that book, says, when you're interacting with other human beings, if what you want is a real communication, real connection, intimate relationship with another human being, you must be completely honest all the time. Blanton says, if you're dealing with the government, the IRS, you may not want to be honest. They're not interested in your welfare. You may need to do what you need to do. I mean, he gave an example. He is a psychologist, been practicing in the Washington, D.C. area for 40-some years. And he says he will frequently, because he's in D.C., he will frequently be contacted by the federal government, the FBI, saying, we are doing background checks on one of your clients who has applied for a job with the federal government. Do you know, what can you tell us about any previous drug use? And he'll say, I don't know anything about any drug use. Well, that's not true. He does know. But he's willing to lie to the government because he doesn't feel like it's in his client's best interest to be honest about that. But that's different. That's not a human being. That's not about a personal relationship. So with personal relationships, always be honest. But again, Ruiz, the Toltec here are talking about much more than honesty. They're talking about impeccability in a different way. Being impeccable with your word. And when he's talking about your word, he's not really even just talking about what you say. He's talking about what you think. He's talking about the energy that you put out there. What he's really saying is, we are powerful, creative beings. Don't put your energy into anything that's not in the direction of truth and love. So if you're, he specifically talks about gossiping, but that's just one example. Don't be saying anything that's not in the direction of truth and love. I would suggest that many people are not following this one all the time when they are beating themselves up. That's not being impeccable with your word. That's putting energy in a direction that's not in the direction of truth and love. Okay? So understand that everything that you say and everything that you think is helping to create your reality and the world around you. And you want to be sure that you're putting that attention into things that are positive. I don't remember her exact quote, but Mother Teresa once said something like, I won't join your demonstration, but I'll be happy to go and, I won't join a protest, but I'll be happy to go and do whatever I can in favor of something. What's the difference? Well, it's exactly what he's talking about here. If you're protesting something, you're protesting war. I mean, hopefully, no one wants war except the people that profit from it. Most of us aren't interested in war. But if you're demonstrating war, you're putting your energy and attention on war. And what we focus on is what we're actually helping to create. So rather than focusing on, protesting war, let's focus on creating more love and peace. Okay? That's what Mother Teresa was saying. That's really what the Toltec are saying with this one. Okay? But anytime we're using our words, whether they're spoken words, written words, or even just words that our thought forms, in any direction that's not completely honest and true, we are harming ourselves and potentially other people. Okay? Is everyone clear about this one? Be impeccable with your word. Any questions about be impeccable with your word? Ladies? The second one was don't take anything personally. This is a big one, I think, because people are frequently taking things personally. Lots of things personally. And what the Toltec point out here is that, again, he actually says in this summary, nothing anyone does, nothing others do is because of you. Okay, so if someone says something to you that hurts your feelings, you want to get clear that your feelings are not hurt because of what someone said. That was a trigger for you. But your feelings are hurt, why? We've talked about this before in this group. Because you're believing what they said, right? At some level, you're buying into it. I mean, the fact is, it makes no difference what other people think. The question is, what do you think? Now, unfortunately, many people don't have enough personal strength to trust in their own beliefs about themselves. So it's always based on what other people think. But what you want to do is get clear for yourself. Who are you? Are you okay with that? If you're not, change it. Do what you can about it. And if you are, it doesn't matter. I think it was Brian Tracy who said, I can't remember now who said, no, it wasn't Tracy, but who said, what other people think of me is none of my business. Okay? Wise words. There's no reason to take anything personally. Understand that what other people say and do is a reflection of them. It's a reflection on where they are, on where they're coming from. This may be difficult to imagine, but it's theoretically possible to get to the point, like the Buddha, where no matter what anyone says to you, you simply smile and gaze at them with unconditional love, understanding where they're coming from. In order to do that, to get to that point, what we all need to do is get to the place where we can completely accept ourselves unconditionally, completely love ourselves unconditionally. Because if I can love every single aspect of myself, including all that stuff that I'm afraid people would run shrieking from the room if they knew about, the dark side, the shadow side that everybody has. If I can get completely comfortable with that, I can't not be comfortable with your dark side. Because it's a reflection of my own. Right? We're all the same. That's what we want to get clear about. So there's truly, it's not just like, well, I'll try to not take things personally, that's going to be hard. No, I mean, when you really understand this, you see that there's no reason to take anything personally. It's not personal. It doesn't matter what they say. It's not personal because it's not about you. It's actually about them. It's a reflection on the other person. So there's no reason to take it personally. Anybody have any questions about this?
If we're all the same, though, it is about you.
We're all connected. Not the same, but connected. It's not about you. It's about them. It's about where they're coming from. It's about their beliefs. It's about their confidence. It's about, it's about the stuff that is haunting them. Again, most people are walking around being driven by a primary disempowering belief that looks or sounds something like, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, I don't belong, I'm not lovable, etc., etc. Deep down, virtually everyone is dealing with one of those issues. These are things that are set up in childhood, and most people never actually completely deal with it. And so it's always there as an undercurrent. So, I mean, we are similar in that everyone has something along those lines going on. But again, when you can completely accept what's true about yours, about where you are, it's pretty easy to understand where someone else is coming from. You don't have to take it personally. In nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg talks about this. It doesn't matter. He talks about two languages. He talks about giraffe language and jackal language. And giraffe language, because the giraffe has the largest heart of any land animal. So we want to be using giraffe language when we speak, and we want to be listening as a giraffe with this big heart, because he says everything that people say is either an expression of please or thank you. But much of what people say is a tragic expression of please or thank you. Okay? So, screaming, ranting, and raving, that's a would you please do this thing for me, or would you please stop doing this other thing for me? It may be a very tragic expression, but that's really what's being expressed. With giraffe ears, you can listen for what the undercurrent is, what that real message is, no matter what they're saying. So no matter what they say to you, you can be listening with giraffe ears. That's how Rosenberg might express it. Unfortunately, what happens is, even when you're speaking giraffe language, most people are used to listening with jackal ears. And so no matter what you say, most people hear an insult, you're talking down to me, whatever it might be, when that's not your intention. Because that's how people are accustomed to listening. That's what they're listening for, because they're listening through their own filters of their fear and their disempowering beliefs about themselves. Okay? So again, no reason to take anything personally. Questions, anybody?
Well, that doesn't mean you should take it as an information advice. It just means you don't have a feeling negative.
No one ever said don't take it as information. Don't take it personally. Two different things.
Constructive criticism is something that you're doing that you really should look at and correct. I mean, that's not taking it personally, but still it's something that you need to oh, wow, maybe I'm really doing this or something.
Agreed. And no one ever said don't take the information in. Don't consider it. Do. Consider everything. Consider it carefully. Don't take it at face value because someone said it. And don't take it personally. When you have enough self-confidence, you can listen to whatever you're hearing and say, yeah, you know what, there's some truth in that. And again, I mean, here's an easy test. Does it push your button in some way? Does it upset you in some way? If the answer is yes, it's probably because at some level you buy into that. So you might want to look at that. I would never personally say you should do anything. Don't shit on yourself or anybody else. Okay? But depending on what you want to create for yourself, it might benefit you to take a look. I can't remember now who said, if one person calls you a horse, you probably, like, what are you talking about? Now, if two people call you a horse, you might give it a little consideration. If three people call you a horse, you might really sit down and seriously consider what they're telling you. And if four people call you a horse, get yourself a feed bag, right? Now, that's, so, if you're continually hearing the same thing, then it may well be that there's some truth there you want to take a look at. But ultimately, you need to be the one that decides for yourself, not based on outside opinion. What's your real opinion of yourself? That's the only thing that really matters, ultimately. Okay? Any questions about don't take it personally?
Well, most times we react to those kind of statements. And that's a really hard one to get your head around because we tend to just react.
Yeah, people do tend to react, but why is that? Again, why do they react? I would suggest it's because, and Toltec suggests as well, it's because we buy into it. We see some truth in it. If you know it's complete and utter nonsense, you just think this person doesn't have they're not a very good judge, they're not really able to see what's going on, but why would it matter to you? So what? I mean, you want to surround yourself with people who see you as you are. If someone doesn't, if they see you completely different, then you probably just don't need to spend a lot of time with that person. But why would you care what they think? Don't invest your energy in that. There's no reason to take it personally. Okay? We good? Let's move on. The third one says don't make assumptions. Now, people make assumptions all the time, don't they? It's perhaps a fear of asking questions. It's perhaps based on pre-existing filters and beliefs, what they think is true. There are many reasons that this happens. But let me demonstrate this for you. Right now, can you all see the building over there where the pump is at the end of the pool? Everyone see that building? Yeah? What color is that building?
Green.
Does everyone agree that the building's green? Okay. So did any of you, one of my favorite books in the world is a book called Stranger in a Strange Land. Anyone read this book? It was written back in the 60s by Robert Heinlein. Great book. It was a big book back in the late 60s. Some of you, almost no one here was old enough to have read it then, so you may not have come across it. But it's a terrific book. I won't tell the whole story, but it takes place in the future, maybe now, actually, because it was written 50 years ago. There are people in the book called, I forget exactly, some kind of witnesses. They're people who have the ability, I think they're called fair witnesses. And fair witnesses are brought in to help decide various questions, judicial issues, whatever it might be. And so if you ask a fair witness, see, fair witnesses, these are people who have the ability to distinguish between what they know and their story. What's the story? Well, the story is what people are making up in their minds about what's so. And fair witnesses have the ability to distinguish where most people don't have such a good ability to distinguish that. So I've been asking over the last month on numerous occasions, are you sure about that? Because often what people think is so, it's not so. It's a story. People believe it's the case, but it's not. Right? It's just a belief. I had once a client, we were talking about this, and I asked someone to share something they believed. And a woman in the group, we were full, we had 14 guests, a woman said, "You can't be happy if you have money." I said, "Are you sure of that?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Are you absolutely sure of that?" "Yes." Well, I couldn't convince her that it was just a belief. But I went around the room and I asked the other people in the room, every single person, "Is that true?" "No." "Is that true?" "No." Every other person said no. I came back to her and said, "Everyone else says it's not true. Is it still true, you think?" She said, "Yes." Okay. Now, is it a fact? What do you think? Is that a fact?
No.
Everyone here can see that's not a fact. There are people with money that are happy. Of course. But how do you think it might be impacting her life? I would suggest there's only two possibilities. Either she has money and she's unhappy because she believes that's how it has to be, or if she wants to be happy, she has no money. She'll make sure she doesn't get any money because she knows it's going to make her unhappy. That's how belief functions. It's a very powerful thing. You want to be careful about belief. So the fair witness, if I said to the fair witness, "What color is that building?" a fair witness would say, "Well, the side I can see is green. I don't know what the other three sides look like. I can't see them. Okay? But most of us don't do that. What do we do instead? We assume that probably all four sides are the same color. My guess is probably none of you have seen all four sides. Maybe some of you have walked down there. But the fact is, you can't see that by looking at this side of the building. And yet we do this all the time. So things happen, and we assume that we know what's going on when we really don't. We want to always be checking in with ourselves. What do I really know here? What's really true about this situation? Instead of making any assumptions at all. Assumptions are disempowering to yourself and to the people around you. That's why he says here, with this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. When you stop making assumptions, what you do instead is you take the responsibility of clarifying things. Hey, you just said something, I'm not really sure what you meant by that. Would you be willing to clarify? Or is this what you meant by that? Yes or no? Now you know, right? If you just go away and assume, you may have a completely different idea, 180 degrees of what they were actually trying to say, or what their actions were about. So, the third agreement says, don't make assumptions. Okay? Don't make any assumptions. If you're not sure, find out. Ask, clarify. And when you're communicating, be as clear as you can be so that other people don't need to make assumptions. Okay, one of the ways you can do this is you can repeat back what someone said to you. So I just heard you say that you think the mangoes were a little sour. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Okay, I want to be sure I'm being as clear as possible what you're saying. I understand what you mean. Okay, that's it's a simple way to do this. One way to do this. Okay, any questions about this one? Anybody? All right, well, let's move on to the next one. The last one, the fourth one says, always do your best. Always do your best. That's pretty self-explanatory. He does make the point here that your best varies under different situations, right? So, if you're always doing your best, you can't beat yourself up. I mean, if you really get, that was the best I could possibly do in that moment. Now, have you ever been in a situation where it was clear to you that some people around you maybe weren't doing their best? You ever have employees that you felt maybe weren't doing what they really were capable of doing? I've certainly been in that situation. And I've been in the situation where I wasn't doing my best other times in my life as well. Transforming this one makes an enormous difference as well. Each of these are incredibly powerful. Each of them. Because, again, as he says, if you're always doing the best that you can do, there's no guilt. How can you feel guilty for not doing better if that's the best you can do? Okay? Now, the importance of these four agreements, the idea is that we want to take all of the disempowering agreements we currently have. What disempowering agreements do you have now? Can anyone think of any? Does anyone have any disempowering agreements that they're aware of?
I'm not good enough.
I'm not good enough. Yeah. Again, that's a huge one, and that's a common one. Again, it shows up in some form in virtually every human being. And that's the kind of agreement that underlies everything else. So it affects every single aspect of your life. And what we tend to do, because we have this agreement with ourselves, we then manifest behavior to support that agreement. See, I'm really not good enough. I screwed up again. See? And this may be completely not conscious, this conversation, but it's going on all the time. We're reinforcing these ideas. And most of us have all kinds of agreements. All kinds. Here's an example. This actually, I believe this came from Radical Honesty, but I don't remember now which of these three books it came from. But it was a story of a woman who, when she was a little girl, she was very happy. She was 3 or 4 years old, and she was singing and just having a great time. It's in this book. Okay, it is in this book. It's probably from this very one. And her mother, who was tired and had a rough day at work, etc., said something like, would you please shut up? You can't sing. Like, you have a terrible voice. Stop singing. Her mother was just irritated, really didn't mean it. But that happens sometimes. People do that, right? And it might well be that, this little 2 or 3-year-old didn't have a trained singing voice. It wasn't the best singing her mother had ever heard. But she said something that this little girl took personally and allowed to affect who she believed she was, what it meant about her. And so not only did she never sing again, she barely even expressed herself. She became almost completely unexpressed until she finally realized, I think with some help, that this was going on for her, and was able to shift that. I just saw on YouTube last night, some of you may have seen this, I can't remember, it was not anything extraordinary, but it was a 34-year-old man in England, one of those TV shows, Britain's Got Talent, or one of those things. I can't remember which one it was. But I think it was in the UK. And there was this 34-year-old man who, for 5 years, had filled out the application to be on the show, and then tore it up. And everyone in his life convinced him that he couldn't sing well enough, that he never had a chance, he wasn't good enough. And probably what was going on was, again, what do you think would have happened if he had a really strong self-image and people around him were saying, you're not good enough? He just said, that's your opinion. Who cares? I think I'm good enough. I'm going to go give it a shot. So the fact is that, my guess is that what was happening was the people around him were mirroring his own self-doubt and poor self-image. And so he completely believed it, because he was hearing what he already believed. So what did he do? Nothing. He finally, 5 years later, finally got on the show. And he was terrified, because he really didn't believe that he should even be there. There were two little voices. On the one hand, he must have believed he had some talent, and he was very passionate about singing. But at the same time, he had all these voices telling him, you're not good enough. You shouldn't be here. What are you doing? Who do you think you are? And then he sang. And he blew everybody away. Standing ovation. So, it's amazing how frequently someone's self-image is affecting all of it. That's an agreement. I'm not good enough. And so most of us have tons of agreements that are completely unconscious. It's not like we sat down and said, you know what? From now on, I'm going to tell myself I'm not good enough. Yeah, that's a good one. What else could I do? How about I can't do this? Right? I forget who said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Okay? Self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think you can't accomplish something, you're never going to. So it's the same thing. We make these agreements about what we're capable of. I would say to you, hey, you're capable of virtually anything. You may not want to do anything or everything, but those things that you're passionate about, don't give up because you haven't mastered it yet. You can do it. Maybe you need more practice, right? You played some beautiful music for us 10 days ago, but opened it by telling us that you're not really a guitar player singer, right? maybe not 100% confident about your ability in those areas. And you're an amazing musician, but that's not where you've focused your career up until now, right? So, I think you probably do understand, hey, you can develop that. It just hasn't been fully developed yet, right? So that's a completely healthy, realistic way to look at it. Hey, I can do this if I choose to. I obviously choose to do this. But I've only, I think you said you've only been playing the guitar at all for a year? Less than a year. Yeah, that was pretty amazing for someone who had a year of playing. Less than a year of playing under the belt. Yeah. So the idea is we have all these agreements that are completely disempowering, that are affecting every single aspect of our life. Brief story. I was out dancing one night, and I'm talking to an attractive woman, and she asked me what I do, and I tell her. What I said was, I run a wellness center. With this music playing, I didn't want to try to explain the whole thing. And I run a wellness center. And she said, oh, so you probably recommend a vegetarian diet. I said, that's a good start. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, that's moving in the right direction. It's not really enough, but it's a good start. She said, well, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm perfectly healthy. I said, well, that's wonderful. I hope you continue that way. Well, I wound up talking to her again half an hour later. And on the second conversation, she told me that in addition to being perfectly healthy, she had asthma and a dozen allergies. And in her mind, these two pieces of information happily coexisted. I'm perfectly healthy, and I have asthma and allergies. And I said to her, you could eliminate your asthma and allergies, and I can help you do that. She said, no, you can't. I said, no, I can. I've helped many people do it before. I can help you too. She said, no, you can't. I said, no, it's honestly, these are things your body can heal and it has a chance. She said, no, they told me I'm going to be taking these drugs for the rest of my life. You can't help me heal. I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. She was. She had a strong belief, and that belief will be true for her because she will manifest it that way. You want to pay real close attention to what you're believing. Okay? It's been said, if you want to know what people really want, just look and see what they have. What are they manifesting? We're manifesting all the time. We're manifesting, we may want perfect health, but we may want more than perfect health to keep eating pizza and drinking beer every night. And those two things do not coexist. Okay? They are mutually exclusive. So if you want perfect health and you want to drink beer and eat pizza every night, you're going to need to make a choice. Which of these things do you want more? What you want to do is get really clear about what your beliefs are. And so if you're believing, I can have these things, and, well, that may not be realistic. At the same time, you don't want to be believing, I can't ever create a high level of health. You certainly can. What you need to do is be willing to make the choices that support that. Each of you told me you wanted to create the highest level of health possible. You absolutely can. I would stake my life on it. I've never seen it fail when someone's willing to do what they need to do. But I've also witnessed people here saying, yeah, but I'm going to make compromises. I have to. That's a belief. And it's a disempowering one. And you can do it if you want to, but it will impact your ability to get what you said you wanted. Just be clear about that. Okay? So start being less unconscious, more conscious about your beliefs. What are you believing? What are you telling yourself deep down? Okay? If something's pushing your buttons, what are you believing? If you're angry, what are you believing in that situation? Are you believing that someone intended to hurt you? Are you believing that it was maybe it wasn't. Is that true, or is it a belief? Okay? So the idea is to get as clear as possible about the agreements that we have with ourselves now, that we've been coexisting with up until now, which have left us how we are today. And once we know what they are, we can say, wait a second, am I willing to live with that agreement? Is this agreement still serving me? Is it serving you to believe you're not good enough? Michael?
No.
Of course not. Okay? And, you know, the whatever the version of that each of us is carrying around, I'm not lovable. Does that serve me? No. And I became conscious of that belief a couple of years ago, and wow, how empowering is that? Now I can say, wait a second. When that comes up, I can say, that's nonsense. Of course that's not true. But what happens is we tend to not be very conscious about this stuff. So again, become as conscious as you can. Start examining. Where's that coming from? Why do I keep manifesting it this way? What am I believing that's having this show up in my life over and over again? Okay? Because those are the agreements that you might want to let go of. And the Toltec are suggesting that when we replace those agreements with the 4 agreements listed here, once again, when we are impeccable with our word, when we're using our word, what we think and what we say only in the direction of love and truth, isn't everything going to improve? How can it not? Okay? When we are not taking anything personally anymore, no matter where it's coming from, no matter who's saying it, no matter what they're saying, realize it's not about you. It's always about the other person. Always. Okay? When we stop making assumptions. I mean, again, this one may require a little more courage than you've expressed up until now, because you have to be willing to take responsibility to clarify. You know, maybe you think, well, this should be obvious. I should know what he means here. But if you don't, speak up. Hey, wait a second. I'm not really sure I understand what you're saying. Okay? Don't make any assumptions. Get clear. And finally, when you're willing to always do your best, when we make those 4 agreements, the primary agreements that we live by, everything can shift. That's the Toltec's message. That's the idea behind the book. It is a great book. I'd still encourage people to read it, but that hopefully this, whatever it's been, 35 or 40 minute summary of this will help you even until you get your hands on the book. So I hope that's been beneficial to you.